Welcome back to Tales Arcane and to another Patreon-only video. And in today's video I want to talk about combat and a really simple way that you can make your combat encounters feel more engaged and interesting as they go on. The main thing I want to talk about here is the fact that HP does not equate to health, at least not directly. So we often think of hit points or HP as a kind of health bar, like in a video game, and every hit that the players land, that health bar goes down, and when it's out, the players land a killing blow and the monster goes down. It's almost like we've depleted their health and they die. But of course in D&D, it's not health points, it's hit points. Your hit point total represents how many hits you can take before you go down. And in the player's case, it's how many hits you can take before you fall unconscious and become sort of immobile on the ground. It doesn't even mean you necessarily die right away. So why am I making this distinction? Well, because if you think of it in these terms, if you realize that not every hit has to even connect with the enemy's flesh. You know, if you're landing a blow against a bandit who's wearing armor, then that first blow might land and it might take away some of their hit points, but it doesn't necessarily draw blood. It might just damage a piece of their armor, or it might just intimidate them a little bit. Those early hits in the first part of a combat encounter don't need to actually extract health from someone, because when you think about it, if you've landed a warhammer successfully against an opponent, you know, 5, 6, 7 times, that person should be taking an absolute beating. And if you can get into this slightly awkward place in D&D combat where every time the player lands a hit on the enemy, you subtract a bit of health, you take a number away from another number, and you announce that that number has been taken away, and then you move on, that becomes quite a boring grind after a little while. It's quite repetitive. But if the kind of damage being dealt begins to change and escalate as the fight goes on, and that becomes a lot more interesting. So imagine you've got a giant, a fire giant is attacking the players. When the players start fighting that fire giant, their first hits almost certainly are not going to actually do physical damage to the fire giant, because the fire giant is wearing heavy armor. You know, the fire giant is much taller than them as well, so they're not necessarily going to be able to land hits on its head, even if it's not wearing a helmet. So at first, those initial attacks might do sort of external damage, like denting the monster's armor, maybe even sort of knocking it slightly so it almost falls over. It doesn't actually fall over, but you can see it kind of being rocked and intimidated by these blows. Because remember, hit points includes everything from the monster's kind of mental capacity to continue fighting all the way down to its own physical health. So initially you are attacking its armor and you're attacking its kind of sense of confidence in battle. And as the hit points get lower, some plates of the armor get so broken that they start falling off. Your players are maybe able to land particularly damaging blows that rip entire plates away from the fire giant's armor, exposing the fire giant beneath. Now we're going to transition over, perhaps about halfway through the fight, to dealing damage to the creature itself. Now arrows are going through the gaps in the armor and piercing into the monster, and the monster is taking that physical damage as well. It can still take additional damage in a sort of mental way, so you're hacking into it, and some of the HP that's being taken away from that fire giant is its physical strength as a result of a wound. But some of that HP could still be its own kind of mental capacity to stay in the game, to stay in the fight. And it's only at that very final area of the combat, say when the monster is down to 10% of its original HP, that's when those attacks start connecting. Everyone is connecting with skin. Every blow is drawing blood, limbs are coming off. That's when you get very kind of visceral and physical with the damage. And that's when HP really does equate to health. But in a way, you can almost think of it as, let's say a monster has 100 HP, you could think of that almost as let's say 4 25 point health bars, or 4 25 point HP bars, and the players are going through each one, and the first one might be morale, the second one might be armor, the third one might be sort of light physical damage, like things like slowing the monster down, you know, cutting it but not actually cutting off a limb, and the final 25 HP of that 100 HP, the final kind of quarter of the monster's HP, as that starts going away, that's when the real lethal damage starts to be landed. That's when you've got things like hands are coming off. Not necessarily things that are going to mechanically change the fight. The monster might still have two attacks, even if one of its hands goes, it's still just attacking with its other hand. But the players really get the sense that things are starting to escalate. And escalation is something that you always want to have in combat. You never want the stakes and the intensity and the action to feel the same at the start as they do at the end. Because, well, especially in a longer combat encounter, a boss battle, you're looking to get this sense of rising tension, rising drama, up towards a crescendo at the end. That final moment when the monster goes down, it should feel so much more exciting and intense than the first round of combat way back at the start. And that's what I think this approach gives you. If you think of HP as a whole kind of holistic collection of factors that make up someone's capacity to fight. Your hit points is just like how many hits can you take and still deal out damage. And if you think of that as morale, armor, sort of physical prowess, and then finally fatal damage, that gives you a lot to work through before the players get that satisfaction of like, oh, now we're drawing blood. Oh, now we're actually putting fear in this monster. Now we're actually seeing like a limb coming off. That you get this sense of the damage escalating. And when the monster finally dies, you don't get that sense of like, okay, I've been hitting the monster repeatedly for the last, hour and a half, and now it's down. You get the sense of, oh, I've been building up to this moment, and now my attacks are landing, killing blows. And you give the players this sense that they almost set up the success later on. Maybe they don't actually get to make sort of physical inroads against the monster until the very last part of the battle, but throughout the battle they're building up to that point. And my players, like just last night I ran a game where one of my recorded games, which is going up on YouTube next month, this month actually, look out for that, Heroes of the Highlands on YouTube this month. At one point someone's breastplate was torn off by a particularly vicious greatsword attack, and my other player then fired their arrow directly at that person whose breastplate had come off, and it struck them in the sort of the collarbone area, which had been exposed by the breastplate being removed. Now, there was no change in their AC, the damage wasn't higher because the breastplate had come off, but in my players' minds they went, oh cool, our barbarian just like broke the breastplate off, our ranger just landed a good shot as a result of that. They got this sense of collaborating and building, putting pressure on the enemy, when in reality the attacks were just the same as they would have been had I not mentioned the breastplate. So all that to say, just as you're running combat, keep thinking about the sort of the breakdown of the monster, the breakdown of the morale, breakdown of their defense. You can even talk about their fighting style changing as their HP goes down. A master swordsman might be very cool and collected when they're at almost full HP. Once they're down to 15-10% of their full HP, their swings are going to be wild and erratic. Again, they're still attacking with exactly the same mechanics, they're not getting a debuff or anything, but the players get this sense that they've got this person cornered, that they've got them on the ropes. And so much of D&D is that line, the players get this sense, the players get this feeling. That's what it's all about. Sure, the mechanics might stay the same throughout the entire combat encounter, but when the players remember that fight, they'll remember this sense of ramping tensions as they built their way up to a grand finale kill at the end. This can apply to a lot of aspects of D&D, but I think it's especially true in combat, that you always want that sense of things getting progressively more intense from the start of the combat to the end. That is everything I wanted to cover in today's video. I was especially fresh in my mind because, as I say, last night I had a particularly intense combat encounter in my game. And yes, if you're interested in seeing me run games, you can keep an eye out on YouTube. I'll be posting, I think it will be about 4 or 5 episodes of a little adventure set in the Heroes of the Highlands setting, which is obviously also available on Patreon. Although it uses a couple of additional towns and locations I made up within the setting for the campaign. But enough shameless self-promotion. I hope this little rant about HP helps you in your combat, and I'll see you in the next video.